All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for making time to attend this briefing session. I would like to acknowledge the support from Senator Cornyn and Senator Booker for the work that we do with family courts throughout the country, and recognize Francie Rooney from Senator Cornyn's office to provide us with some remarks. Ms. Rooney?
Hi, thanks all for taking the time to be here. Can't say enough about the support that Senator Cornyn has for the system of juvenile and family court judges in Texas. And I know that capability and expertise is replicated nationwide. Obviously, we're very supportive of federal funding and training because the ability to treat, especially juveniles who end up in the court system with trauma-informed care and respect and making sure their voices can be heard is so important for making sure that those individuals' experience with the juvenile justice and the family court system is something that doesn't have really negative effects on their lives moving forward. And I know that that's an iterative process, and the folks on this call, I'll share that goal. And so looking forward to hearing from everybody else and having open ears, and looking forward to working with everybody into the next fiscal year, into the future, and to, again, continue to support that training. Thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Ms. Rooney. Our goal this afternoon is to share with you how we strive to improve outcomes for children and families who come into contact with state and tribal courts throughout the United States every day. We are the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, NCJFCJ, who were founded in 1937. And despite our name, our membership includes all types of professionals who contribute to the work of family courts: judges, court managers, attorneys, social workers, mental health professionals, probation officers, and others. Our task is to facilitate the implementation of federal laws which seek to protect victims of domestic violence, improve outcomes for children who have been abused and neglected, and to promote rehabilitation of juvenile offenders while keeping communities safe. We offer educational programs, provide technical assistance, and conduct research to facilitate compliance with federal initiatives managed through the Department of Health and Human Services, the Office on Violence Against Women, and the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. In terms of education, we offer 2 training conferences every year. Our spring conference focuses on juvenile justice issues. Our annual summer conference focuses on all topics related to family courts. Year-round, we offer periodic training programs to prepare state and tribal courts to handle child abuse and neglect cases, serve children victims of human trafficking, respond to domestic violence, and address teen dating violence. We have expanded our educational outreach online through webinars. We also offer reference and research materials on our website, ncjfcj.org. There, you will find a wealth of bench cards we have developed as quick reference guides on how to respond to the many and complex issues we frequently see in family courts. As for technical assistance, we work with individual courts to develop their technical capacity and institute trauma-informed practices responsive to the needs of children and families in contact with the court system. Indeed, I learned about NCJFCJ about 20 years ago when it advised the court where I work on how to strengthen and improve our operations in family court. Our research branch is the National Center for Juvenile Justice, which compiles and analyzes data on which the federal government relies to develop its juvenile justice policy. We also publish a quarterly academic journal, the Juvenile and Family Court Journal, which offers articles from researchers and practitioners exploring complex family court issues. We pursue each of these tasks while keeping in mind the need to advance, promote, and strengthen diversity, equity, and inclusion in our profession, our membership, and the court system. we make a concerted effort to address topics and to share experiences related to DEI in every training program and conference which we offer. For the past 4 years, NCJFCJ has convened and hosted a conversation between 14 national organizations committed to DEI in the justice system. There, we share information about our respective activities and coordinate efforts whenever possible. Similarly, we work closely with state and tribal courts to better serve Native communities. We offer programs to train our membership on the Indian Child Welfare Act and expand our awareness of the challenges facing tribal communities and courts. And we will host our 2024 annual conference on tribal lands to underscore our commitment. My name is Hiram Puig-Lugo. I am the immediate past president of NCJFCJ. I am an associate judge with the Superior Court of the District of Columbia. It is an honor to moderate this panel of 4 esteemed and distinguished colleagues who serve with me on the NCJFCJ Board of Directors. I will call on each of them separately to introduce themselves before we proceed with the presentations, beginning with Judge Faith Graham.
Hi, thank you everyone for joining us. I am Faith Graham, the judge of Tippecanoe Superior Court 3 in Lafayette, Indiana. I have been on the bench for 17 years, 6 years as an appointed juvenile magistrate and 11 years as an elected judge. I've been a member of NCJFCJ since 2010, and I joined the board of directors at the 82nd annual conference in July 2019.
Judge Martinez Jones.
Hi, I'm Aurora Martinez Jones. I am the Texas State District Court judge in the 126th District Court for Travis County. It's seated in our state's capital of Austin, Texas. I've been a judge for 8 years. I was first an associate judge, then the elected 126th State District Court judge. And I've been a member of NCJFCJ for all 8 years that I've been a judge and on the board for the last 5.
Justice McKeig.
Bonjour. Thanks for having us. My name is Anne McKeig. My Indian name is Awanakwe, which means mist woman. I am on the Minnesota Supreme Court. I've been on that court for 6 years. Prior to that, District Court, which is located in St. Paul, Minnesota. I have been a judge now between the District Court and the Appellate Court for about 14 years. And I have been a member of the council for approximately 10 plus years and a board member for a couple of years. Miigwech.
Judge Carr.
Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are. I am Judge Gayl Carr. I am a judge in the Fairfax Juvenile and Domestic Relations District Court in Fairfax, Virginia. We are a suburb, if you will, of the nation's capital, about 30 miles outside of the District of Columbia. I have proudly served as a judge for the last 28 years. I've been a member of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges since the 1990s. I've been a board member since 2019 and president-elect as of July of 2022.
Fantastic. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. At this point, we will go back to the beginning to Judge Graham for her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Juvenile and family court judges, of course, are very different from other civil or criminal courts. I'm sure this panel could speak for hours about the juvenile justice system, but in short, juvenile and family courts are responsible for children. Paternity or divorce cases involving custody, parenting time, and child support for children, delinquency cases involving children who commit criminal acts, abuse and neglected children, otherwise known as CHINs or children in need of services, termination of parental rights matters, guardianships, protection orders, and more. Being a juvenile or family court judge takes a great deal of strength. You are faced with some of the hardest challenges and must be willing to acknowledge imperfections within the system and strive for improvement. You must be able to recognize even the smallest strengths among the weaknesses in order to respond in a firm, fair, and compassionate manner. It might seem easy to say the kid who stole a bag of chips and a soda from the local gas station should be swiftly and strictly punished as a lesson. But what if you learned that same kid hadn't eaten since the day before, that he had no lunch money, there was no electricity in the home, and he gave the sandwich that his mother made for him to his younger brother. It might seem even easier to say that parental rights should be terminated for the parents who haven't been employed, haven't provided a stable home for their children, and who continuously use drugs. But what if you learned those same parents were themselves neglected as children, grew up in homes where drug use was standard, never graduated high school, could barely read, and thought multiple evictions were just part of life because they had never met anyone who had always lived in the same house? The juvenile justice system is based on rehabilitation and family preservation rather than fault or punishment. The best interests of the child are always paramount. More often than not, families entering the juvenile or family court do so at their worst moments, facing crisis in one way or another, and there are no simple solutions for the complex problems they bring. Accordingly, the role of the juvenile or family court judge extends far beyond the courtroom into the community. An underlying goal of the juvenile and family court judge is to make decisions that strengthen not just the children and families before us, but their children and grandchildren and so on for an overall safer community. Understanding more than just state and federal law is necessary. Understanding adolescent development, trauma, domestic violence, substance use disorders and treatment, mental health, etc., is all critical to making those decisions, as is collaboration with system stakeholders. Prosecutors, public defenders, child protection agencies, CASAs, service providers, and families is a necessity. Leadership is key, and judges who are trained can train other judges and convene and educate those stakeholders for improvements within the system and better outcomes for children and families. Even judges with years of experience can encounter new issues. For example, not long ago, I was faced with a challenging child welfare case. A report of physical and sexual abuse of a 12-year-old girl. The perpetrator was alleged to be her father, a man who traveled with her to the United States from Guatemala. His girlfriend contacted the police after interrupting a sexual act, then fled the area in fear of retaliation. There were no records confirming the identity of the man or the child or confirming parentage. The child's mother was reported to be in Guatemala and spoke Quiche, a specific dialect from the Mayan region. On day one, the case involved many concerns and issues: physical abuse, sexual abuse, potential human trafficking, immigration, language barriers, and cultural differences. Imagine encountering that case as a new judge. What did I do? I turned to NCJFCJ. NCJFCJ remains on the cutting edge of research and data and supports judicial officers by providing us with bench cards and enhanced resource guidelines in these and many other areas. A bench card for court-ordered trauma-informed mental health evaluation of child, applying principles of adolescent development and delinquency proceedings, a judicial guide to child safety and custody cases, a checklist for children and youth exposed to violence. These are all examples of bench cards and enhanced guidelines. All of these serve as cornerstones for effective decision-making, for asking targeted questions to identify and address real issues so children and families can thrive. And I have personally found them one of the greatest assets in the courtroom. NCJFCJ's National Resource Center on Military Connected Families in the courts is particularly helpful when navigating these cases when a parent is active in the military. As a new judge years ago, one of the best pieces of advice I received was to join NCJFCJ, and I have shared that advice many times. Thank you for your interest today in NCJFCJ, and I will turn it over to Judge Martinez Jones for more.
Thank you, Judge Graham. Well, much like Judge Graham, I received some wonderful wisdom when I took the bench 8 years ago. That wisdom came from a former NCJFCJ President and one of our current appellate court Chief Justices, Darlene Byrne. She told me what I had to do and what was immediate was to become a member of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. What this was about was the resources, education, and experience that I really needed that wasn't given to me in law school, and I wouldn't receive otherwise as a judge, on how to really do this work in the best way to serve our children and families. In Texas, we have 254 counties. We're a big state, and we are very diverse all across the state. I have learned through working with the NCJFCJ and our model court work about looking at improved processes for supporting our families, that one of the key things we need to take into consideration is our community, because every community is different. Every community's voice is important, especially in doing work with children and families, both in the child welfare system and in the juvenile justice system. Through being a model court and listening to our community and gaining education from how other communities across this country have done it through the work of NCJFCJ, we've been able to really come up with some great ways to see how and why and what we need to do to improve the situation for children and families. In my role as a district court judge, I have the privilege and the complex and very difficult job also of working with children who are dually involved in both the juvenile justice system and the child welfare system. It has been incredibly important to be a part of NCJFCJ to be able to do this really unique and special role, because our child welfare agency in the state of Texas is a state agency, but our juvenile justice systems are local across the whole 254 counties. So things happen very differently, and bringing those two systems together really requires a lot of extra support. With the support of being a model court, we've been able to think up new ways to do it. And we had, with my predecessor, start a dual status docket where we started hearing the case of the child, both on the juvenile side and the child welfare side at the same time. We had all of the advocates coming together, meaning the child welfare workers and the juvenile probation officers had to actually have some conversations. They had to actually work together to try and solve, both on the local level and the state level, how we use our resources efficiently and effectively to try and get these children out of the system. And we have been able to build upon that with the amazing ideas we get from the conferences that we have through NCJFCJ, from talking to other judges in other communities who are dealing with similar situations, and really learning about the best ways to bring this together, and especially considering the data that NCJFCJ does through our NJJ, which specifically has been helpful, is the 50-state study that happened. And we were able to take a look at the way all 50 states handle juvenile justice cases and really try and learn and understand what's going on in other places. In Texas, we have a lot of strong judicial education statewide, but we do have a gap in judicial education specific to juvenile justice. And NCJFCJ has been helping us in that space. I'm very excited that our upcoming Juvenile Justice Conference in March will be held in Texas and Dallas, because it's been an opportunity to shine a light on the need that we have in Texas to continue doing the work of NCJFCJ, learning more and bringing together our juvenile judges just as much as we bring together our child welfare judges, so that we can have a stronger support for all our children and families. And as we've grown our dual status docket in this community where I preside, we've been able to even convene a pilot. And so now we're looking beyond not just how do we serve those children who are dually involved in both child welfare and juvenile justice, but we have come together and bringing all of those advocates who are now working really well together, having good conversations and planning, and we're looking at prevention. We are now working on how to prevent kids who are in the juvenile justice system from going into the child welfare system, and the kids who are already in the child welfare system from going into the juvenile justice system. So with really strong support, education, studies, and data that NCJFCJ provides. I know in my community in Travis County, and we are sharing with the other counties across Texas, we are hopefully going to improve the situation for a lot of children and families in our whole state. So I'm very excited to share that with all of you all on how that's helped us here, even on the local level, and bringing our community together. And then I'm going to turn it over to Judge Anne McKeig.
Thank you, Justice Judge, all the same. My dog is snoring, everyone, so I hope that doesn't interrupt your focus on what I'm about to say to you. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really glad that you're taking the time. I know that you get overwhelmed with information, but this is incredibly important. I've been on the bench 14 years now, and I'm on the appellate bench, which is very different than my district court trial court experience. But one of the things that I've appreciated about the National Council is that they look at the work at a much broader picture in a much bigger way, rather than just focusing on one element of the criminal justice system, which includes our appellate courts, who are coming down with final decisions on very critical issues, specifically as they relate to children and families. Throughout my career, I was a county attorney where I did child welfare for 16 years. So this has been a focus for my entire life, and professional life anyway. And it is frustrating when there's not a lot of organizations that really support this work or train on this work, or can help you in a way that is meaningful to do this work well. You know, this is work that impacts children and families' lives. And as a country, we always talk about how children are our most important resource. And yet I've got to say, as a professional who's worked in this area for, you know, a very long time, I fail to see that on occasion. So I really appreciate the support of the National Council, because it is an organization that really puts the work behind our children and families and tries to come up with creative solutions, and not just accepting sort of what has always been. These cases are extremely complex. They're only becoming more complex with the issues that our society is facing. The pandemic did not help this. It has, I think, even heightened and put even a stronger focus on a lot of the issues that our children and families are facing. And as judges, you know, we don't get sprinkled by the wisdom fairies when we take the bench. You know, you'd like to think that that happens. We come with what we know, but we also come with what we don't know. And, you know, I think of a perfect example of a young man that I'm going to refer to as Black Eagle, which is his Indian name. And he entered the child welfare system when he was 2 years old, and he went through approximately 18 different placements. And he did the traditional unfortunate graduation from being a child in need of protection and/or services as a result of being physically assaulted, sexually assaulted, living in a home where there was surrounding by a lot of violence, and a lot of chemical health issues, and complicated by mental health that his mom had. And he went from 2 years old to, at the age of 10, entering a residential facility because he was moving into the delinquency world, our juvenile justice. And from there, he went to Red Wing by the time that he was 15. But I got on the Supreme Court. I had the opportunity to go and see him. He was about to be released from prison. And I talked to him about what could we do as a system and how could we change things for him. But the first thing that I said to him is I just wanted to tell him that I was sorry for what had happened to him in his lifetime. And I was sorry for my role in that, and for the fact that I failed him and that it wasn't his fault. And this very stoic young Native man, he was 32 at the time, started to cry and said that no one had ever told him that it wasn't his fault, and he didn't know that anyone cared. And that is a problem. I mean, we can learn, or we hope we come into the job with compassion. We hope that we come into the job with a very broad understanding of what families face, but it is important that we can move or keep our judicial education and training, but also coupling that with real life experience. And one of the things that I have found most helpful is actually getting outside of my little, you know, office in St. Paul and going to a conference where I'm able to talk to other individuals like those that you have on the panel here, and hearing about groundbreaking practice that is happening within their jurisdictions. Otherwise, we don't have that opportunity, even within our own state. We have 87 counties in the state of Minnesota. I think that we have a very strong child welfare system, but unfortunately, we've not been able to move the disparities as it has happened since I entered the work in 1992. They have remained about the same, and that's a problem. This is an opportunity for us to change the trajectory of a child's life and the trajectory of our whole criminal justice system. If we can actually intervene in a way that is meaningful and that is helpful and it is the judge's role in this is critical. It is critical. Then we can prevent kids from actually entering the pipeline, which is currently foster care to prison, which is unacceptable. And I can tell you that when I've gone out and talked to members within the community, many youth as well as young adults have said, I felt like the judge cared about me. And that was one of the very first things that they talked about. Not that the judge sent me to prison, which they may have, but that they felt like the judge actually knew who they were and actually cared about them. And it is incredibly important. And the opportunities to talk about this work on a level that is required for us to be able to make change when you don't have a lot of organizations that support that sort of creativity and collaboration, it's a problem. And I have found the National Council to be one of the very few, if not really the only one that I'm involved in at this point. And it stretches across even the work and acknowledgement of our tribal courts and all that they are facing, and collaborating with them in a way that allows us to also draw from the tribal courts and the experience and how they're working with families that they refer to as relatives, not foster care. They're our relatives. We are all our relatives, which I think is a unique way of even just labeling or how we look at these cases. And so the support that you give to the council, I just want you to know that it affects those individuals like Black Eagle who are on the ground and who are experiencing the outcome of what our criminal justice system has to offer. And I hope that we're able to give you some really solid information today that will allow you to continue to support, and hopefully we can answer any of your questions. So again, to you, I say miigwech. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Judge Gayl Carr.
Thank you. I'm going to very briefly cover 4 areas that I'm seeing in the courtroom. One about domestic violence, human trafficking, mental health issues, and then finally the importance of juvenile and family courts and hope. Domestic violence, we all are aware of. We have the Violence Against Women's Act. And through our work with the National Council and as former chair of our Family Violence and Domestic Relations Advisory Committee, there's continued work that needs to be done in terms of training for judges and advocates through our leadership institutes and other programs. The perplexing issues that I'm seeing in the courtroom today are a significant rise in the number of domestic violence cases and a rise in non-fatal strangulation cases since COVID and beyond. These troubling dynamics include survivors of abuse who are compelled to return home to the abuser due to economic and emotional needs. And it's compounded by, unfortunately, far too many of the prosecutors who are assigned to prosecute criminal domestic violence and strangulation cases are inexperienced in the law in general. They're often fresh out of law school. Often they're not properly trained in the lethality and the dynamics of domestic violence, and they're overwhelmed by the magnitude of their caseloads. This creates a perfect storm, if you will, for the inexperienced and untrained prosecutor to easily conclude this survivor is uncooperative or unwilling to come to court to help prosecute this charge, which results in the abuser not being held accountable and for abuse to continue. The dynamics of domestic violence, including where she's changed her story or he's telling something different now, not coming to court, wanting to disengage from the criminal justice system, it's not uncommon. It's the dynamics of domestic violence. This is why the intervention must be centered on why. It is through judicial education and training and leadership efforts, such as those provided by the National Council of Juvenile Family Court Judges, that judges and other court professionals learn how to navigate the dynamics of domestic violence, including why the survivor is uncooperative or unwilling to protect their own safety, or educating on that perplexing question, why doesn't she just leave? We need extensive training and education for all of our core partners in the criminal justice system to address these human dynamics that are coupled with significant safety issues while upholding the law and holding offenders accountable. Our courts and communities, if we are going to keep women and men safe from domestic violence, must have sufficient resources to not only train judges and advocates, but also the executive branch of government, prosecutors, law enforcement, magistrates, in a collaborative approach. The second issue that I'm seeing in the courtrooms is primarily girls, but boys as well, young boys and girls who are disappearing in our communities. They're disappearing from their homes and their schools. They're running away from home, usually to escape a troubled home, drugs or alcohol by their parents, mental health issues, poverty, and often sexual abuse. Children run away for a reason. The problem is, once we lose those children to the streets, the predators are waiting. They're lurking. It is amazing how human trafficking networks of predators find our most vulnerable children. Children who have often immigrated to this country, who are experiencing limited financial resources in their homes. They're easy targets for our children, and they are the most vulnerable for human trafficking. We see these children and families in our courtroom who are before the court for child in need of services or child in need of supervision because they've run away or they're missing from school. We need help in how to intervene appropriately to save our children, to help these children to be safe. We need education and resources on how to effectively intervene to keep our children safe, including safe shelters, safe harbors for these children whose numbers are increasing daily. The third area that I'm seeing as a trend in the courtroom is the significant rise in behavioral health issues in both children and adults of all ages. Mental health issues including anxiety, depression, suicide or suicide ideation, fragile coping mechanisms due to trauma and unresolved trauma, mental health diagnosis that is often undiagnosed or untreated or both. Our educators here in Virginia tell us that since the children returned to the classroom after COVID, the vast majority of their time and attention is spent addressing behavioral health issues of children. We've noticed the same issues in the courtroom, including with adults after COVID. The National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges has recognized this issue to address behavioral health issues through its leadership in creating a new division just in July of 2022, a behavioral health division. This new division will focus on mental health issues, trauma, self-medicating behaviors of adults and children, because we're not seeing a corresponding rise in resources and education for judges and other court personnel on how to effectively intervene in and out of the courtroom when dealing with behavioral issues. The National Council is growing its work in this area for trauma, for not only trauma for the litigants in front of us, but before judges, for court staff, because I can't be a good judge if I am not healthy myself. So we're looking at well-being, the well-being of litigants, understanding trauma, as well as our own staff and court professionals. Through the National Council, we just finished a project with other national groups about well-being in domestic relations district court, which in a nutshell addresses the importance of well-being in our juvenile and family courts, understanding trauma, its impact, how to create a trauma-responsive court, understanding the spectrum of mental health conditions and how to respond to them, among other topics. Connected to this issue of behavioral health is a segue into another issue I'm seeing in my courtroom. Children are overdosing on opiates, fentanyl to be precise. I'm going to repeat that. They are overdosing on fentanyl. They're overdosing in the community, in our schools, in our courtrooms. Our cases here in Fairfax County are skyrocketing. We have had 31 babies born since July 1st of 2022 with drugs or alcohol in their bodies. Just today, I learned that a child on one of our cases overdosed, he is alive, and that his sibling is selling fentanyl. The local and state governments are trying to respond with resources and services, but we are in dire need of solutions, ideas, education, because what we are doing is just putting a Band-Aid on a hemorrhaging gunshot wound. We don't have enough services or understanding of the lethality of fentanyl. We don't have enough programs for our mothers and babies. We don't have programs for 15 and 16-year-olds who are overdosing on fentanyl. Last week, another one of our teens overdosed in court. And last, in what I call my Making a Difference file, as a judge, I call it a toolkit. I have a toolkit on virtually every aspect of my responsibility as a judge: domestic violence, child abuse, child support, juvenile delinquency. But my toolkits, they become outdated. Sometimes the tools get rusty and they need replacement. I'm in constant need of new and improved tools in my toolkit. It is through resources and education and training and webinars and podcasts and other training and educational programs provided by this organization, the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, that help keep a judge's toolkit up to date and ready to intervene and protect our public safety. One toolkit that always remains in my toolkit is hope. You see, juvenile and family courts are the most important courts in the nation. Why? Because we deal with our most important resources, children and families. We are responsible for changing and impacting lives, changing the trajectory of terrible, awful, and vile acts inflicted on children or survivors of domestic violence or victims of crime. We are responsible for improving outcomes and providing hope. Yes, hope. You see, we have to stand for hope. We have to believe in it, deep in our bones. We have to pick it up, all of the pain and all of the trauma and all the bad things that we see in our courtrooms every day. And we have to still have hope that we can change lives, that people get a second chance, that we can do the work, the hard, gritty work of healing and giving people an opportunity to go out there and be the best person they can be. So this organization, through all of its work, through its compassion, through its education, stands for hope. And we need hope. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, each of you, for sharing with us how NCJFCJ supports your work, whether it's to help you deal with the hardest challenges that you see as a judge, or provide amazing ideas that provide fuel for local innovation, or invite you to approach your work with compassion and creativity, as well as expanding your toolkit to deal with matters such as domestic violence, behavioral health issues, and the opiate crisis. Thank you, audience members, for being here today. We have heard about the amazing work that the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges undertakes to assist courts with implementing federal policies and improving the lives of families and children who come into the state and tribal court systems. It is a work that never ends. The need for training and capacity building is forever ongoing. There's a regular turnover of judges and professionals who work in family courts. New judges are elected or appointed. Experienced judges may rotate into other assignments. Veteran judges may retire. New laws are enacted, and there can be new policies to put in place as we respond to the emerging challenges and learn from our collective experiences. New insights from scientific research and data analysis call upon us to reconsider how we perform our work. As a result, we're required to modify our procedures and realign our strategies to improve outcomes in the court system. State and tribal courts around the country rely on NCJFCJ to maintain and expand training programs, to facilitate compliance with new legislation and advance new policies, to apply the insights which come from scientific analysis and respond to the changes and challenges we see expand every day in society. Federal funds are essential to make available judicial training in matters related to child welfare issues, domestic violence, human trafficking, and juvenile justice strategies, all of which are of deep federal concern, as well at the state level. We ask you not just to maintain, but also to consider expanding resources to strengthen operations and improve outcomes in the court system. But we're not here just to ask for your support. We are here to offer our support for the work that you do. Please keep us in mind as a resource when you consider issues which fall within our areas of expertise. When you would appreciate clarity on how changes in the law may impact families and children, or simply when you would like to learn more about the work that family court judges do. We can connect you with NCJFCJ members in your jurisdiction who can provide greater detail about the challenges facing family courts in your jurisdiction. You know how to reach us. Please visit our website, ncjfcj.org. Examine our publications, explore our bench card bank, watch one of our videos or webinars, and consider coming to one of our conferences. This year, our Juvenile Justice Conference is taking place in Dallas, Texas, from March 19th to March 22nd. Our annual conference is taking place just outside the Beltway in Baltimore, Maryland, from July 16th to July 19th. Our vision is for a society in which every family and child has access to fair, equal, effective, and timely justice. Our mission is to provide all judges, courts, and related agencies involved with juvenile, family, and domestic violence cases with the knowledge and skills to improve the lives of the families and children who seek justice. It is a mission we pursue with passion. It is a mission to which we are deeply committed. At each step along the way, we are guided by our values of compassion, leadership, education, and community. We invite you to make them grow. At this point, I invite you to share your comments or to post your questions to the panelists. And again, thank you for your time and attention. And in the meantime, while we wait for questions and comments to appear, I will start out with a question for our panelist. How has your practice changed or improved since the pandemic? And I will start with you, Judge Martinez Jones.
Well, the pandemic has been an interesting thing, but with the ability that we had in Texas to do pretty much across the whole state remote court proceedings, we've had a lot of changes. As a younger judge, I appreciate the technology, and we've had to work through what does it mean to be a virtual court, and how does that better support families, especially those who may otherwise not be able to have access to the justice system. So I think that having our Texas judges able to use Zoom for court has opened our justice system's eyes to a new approach and a new forum for helping to assure there's access to justice. And I do know that we have had many webinars that I have helped with as well to look at how we use that technology in the most effective, efficient, and ethical way, and the ways that we can start building that into the new frontier of judicial work now that we are starting to emerge back in person doing hybrid options as well.
Thank you. Judge Graham, anything you'd like to add?
Sure. We have found that using the remote options that we discovered during COVID has actually increased engagement with some of our parents in our child welfare cases who either would not appear in court because of an outstanding warrant or was a distance away, transportation difficulties. But we ended up having more parents appearing and being actively engaged in their cases when we were using those remote systems. So that was an eye opener. I was surprised that we had more engagement from parents in that format.
Thank you. We have another question, and then I see that somebody is raising their hand. But here's the question that I will pose to you, Judge Carr. When and how did you know that being a judge, particularly in your field, would be part of your career path?
I always knew I wanted to be what I call a change agent because of my experiences as a child. I had a tough childhood with a mother who had substance abuse issues. And I knew from high school that I wanted to be a change agent. I wanted to make a difference in someone's life. I didn't know that that would be a lawyer. I didn't know that would end up being a judge. I didn't know I'd end up on the board of directors of the National Council of Juvenile Family Court Judges and here today. But what I did know is that I wanted to help people avoid some of the experiences that I had. And so I started out as a social worker. I was a social worker for the Commonwealth of Virginia in Child Protective Services on what is called the Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline. And so from that experience as a social worker working with children who have been abused or neglected, and through my social work degree, I decided, should I go to law school or should I get my master's? And I realized that law would open up more doors for me to be that change agent. So I elected to go to law school. Again, being a judge was not on my vision board, if you will, but another judge said to me one day, have you ever considered it? And I put my name in, and it's just ironic to me. Maybe it's not so ironic, maybe it's destiny that I would end up in a juvenile and domestic relations district court as a change agent, but in a different way. So sometimes our path is known to us, but it may not be exactly where we think we're going to be. But I think this is where I'm supposed to be. I don't see my court as a harsh place. We deal with difficult cases, yes, but we help people solve problems. We help people stay safe. I see people out in the community and they say to me, thank you, or you really helped me change my life. And that's what the importance is of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, is we help people change outcomes. So I'm a change agent. That's the way I like to see it. Great
Thank
question.
you. I think all of us have something in our background that steers us in this direction. It is not generally what most people would say brings them to law school or to the bench. But those of us who are part of NCJFCJ have traveled that path. We will ask the person who had a raised hand to please post their question in the chat box. In the meantime, I have another question in the chat box that I will direct to Justice McKeig. What keeps you motivated to continue to fight for such harsh issues in the midst of adversity and hardships that you face?
Well, that's a great question, but I think it's because what other choice is there? You know, we certainly don't want to give up on people. And I always say that if we don't get it right, the kids and the families are the ones who are going to suffer the consequences of it. And so even when I get down or get tired, I will reach out to colleagues, many who are part of the National Council, and we sort of lift each other up and remind each other why it is that we do this work and the importance of this work. And I just also have to throw in there that one of the things that I appreciate is that, you know, being a judge of color is not always easy. Being a judge is not easy. It's an isolating job, but you add in being a judge of color and all of our additional responsibilities that I think are not necessarily shared by some of our colleagues, and that is our responsibilities and obligations to our communities. You know, I'm the first Native American justice on a Supreme Court in all of the United States. And with that comes a lot of obligations and a lot of responsibilities. And that can become very overwhelming at times. And so being able to reach out to others who have had similar experiences or sort of know what it is that I'm talking about without having to say a whole lot is incredibly important and necessary to rejuvenize us to be able to brush ourselves off and go back to the table and to continue to do the very best that we can, because there's a lot of people who are counting on us. And And I hope that I can continue to do this work for a long time to come. I might lose some sleep. I might have a little more gray hair, but that's okay.
Thank you. Judge Martinez Jones, would you like to add anything to Justice McKeig's response?
Just that I agree wholeheartedly, and I think NCJFCJ has been a major uniter for judges who come from similar backgrounds. And listening to some of my fellow judges talk today, I feel, it's a place for those judges of kindred spirit and kindred heart to be able to come together and really support each other, which is very important and necessary, especially with how difficult our work can be, and needing that support on each other who understands that this work has to continue, and we are well suited to do it.
Thank you. Judge Graham, anything you'd like to add to either of the previous comments?
Sure, I would say that all these are tremendously hard issues. It's not all doom and gloom. There's small moments for us that make us continue to go forward. For example, that kid who stole the bag of chips and soda pop. When that family gets connected to community resources and that mom is able to provide for her children and everything settles down in that family, it's a good moment. But boy, when that kid comes back 10 years later in his uniform after graduating from basic training in the military, it's a great moment. So those sustain us.
Thank you. Let's just follow up on something Judge Carr said, the concept of hope, in which Judge Graham just illustrated. When you look at the court system, the one place where you find the greatest challenges, but you possibly encounter the greater rewards as a judicial officer, is family court. There could be no more challenging and no more rewarding place to be within the court system. And Judge Carr, I have a question that came in for you. What do you see that can help young people from being taken in by sex traffickers on social media? And thank you for raising this issue.
Well, you're very welcome. It's one near and dear to my heart. Social media makes it a lot easier for trafficking. What we need to do is answer the why. Why is that child leaving their home and communities in the first place? Because all of us need a connection. And if we have the right situation, our family is that connection. Our family keeps us grounded, keeps us bonded. But when that family unit is dysfunctional, fragmented, or having problems, then that child is going to try to go out and find that connection, find that bond somewhere else. So we've got to have education, support, resources, training on what we can do to intervene, to keep that child connected in a safe way. So correcting whatever's going on at home. If we can't keep the child in the home, finding a safe harbor, a safe place. But I think the common denominator for children, as is with adults, is a connection. You have to have a connection. And for most of our children, it's a strong family connection. But when that's fractured, they're out in the streets and the predators are waiting. And I just want to say this. I've been a judge for 28 years. I've been dealing with children running away for years, but it has never been that they ran away and now they're in the hands of traffickers. That's the difference. And that's the impact of social media. And it scares me, really does. But we have to give children connections. We have to address why they're leaving.
That's a very important point. Thank you for sharing. We have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to circle back to each of you. There are no additional questions in the chat box. In a minute or less, any takeaway that you want the audience to take with them today, Judge Martinez Jones.
Just that I hope everyone does lean on NCJFCJ, as you said, Judge Puig-Lugo, as a resource. And I will look forward to seeing some folks later on in the spring for our in-person Days on the Hill.
Thank you. Judge Graham?
I agree with Judge Martinez Jones about being a resource. Boy, sometimes we're faced with legislation or new laws or things that oh my gosh, how are we going to in practice be able to implement this? Why I wish someone would have asked us before. And so I really hope that you will take away using NCJ and the National Council and those of us as a resource.
Thank you. Justice McKeig, any takeaways?
Yeah, well, I just want to add to that because it's one thing that I have seen more at the appellate level is the impact. You know, a law can look really good on paper, like it's going to be this great idea and it's going to have this really positive impact. But in reality, I always say, well, that's really not the way that it works on the ground, or the impact perhaps has not been thought of about how that is going to, what that's going to look like. And so reaching out to us, I think that one of the great things about the council is that the diversity of the membership is incredible, and the wealth of experience and expertise is dynamite. And so we remain here at your service. You've got a tough job, and we're here to help you in any way that we can. So thank you again.
Thank you. And Judge Carr, any takeaways?
Justice McKeig took some of mine. I was going to say, I'll echo it though. The National Council is made up of a collective group of dedicated, caring, passionate, not only just judges, but the staff and all of the service providers and all of the people of our organization who really just care, and they want to make a difference in the lives of children and families. And second, the vast amount of resources that you can rely on with this organization is just amazing. You just have to ask.
Thank you. So I echo what my fellow panelists have stressed, which is to rely on us to help you do your work and to inform the positions that you advance. Just so you know, those of us who work as trainers or facilitators in these programs are not paid for doing so, okay? So when we're asked for funding, it's not like we're asking for you to put money in our pockets. What we're asking is for us to work with the wonderful NCJF research staff and program staff to make sure that the family courts in the country, be it at the state level or at the tribal level, are prepared to do what needs to happen in the best interest of the children in our country. Thank you for being here today. Check out our website. See you in Dallas in March, if not in Baltimore in July. Have a good afternoon.